Today we're going to take a closer look at the Lotmaxx SC-10 Shark. Hello everyone, Chris here, and this is the SC-10 Shark from Lotmaxx, a Far East printer manufacturer in China. Now this one was available on two different crowdfunding campaigns, first on Indiegogo, then on Kickstarter. It does offer a 235 by 235 by 260 millimeter build volume, a heated bed with a spring steel sheet on top, and it has a BuildTech-like surface. It does have a Bowden-fed hot end, but the extruder has dual drive gears. It comes with a touchscreen, it does have proprietary firmware, it has a 32-bit mainboard and silent stepper drivers. You also get filament runout detection. Now you might be telling yourself, well, this is just another i3 machine that has aluminum extrusion, just like we see all the time nowadays. And you might be right on that. But the Shark has a few tricks up its sleeve, like add-on ABL for low cost, and dual color printing, as well as laser engraving. So there's a lot of stuff to cover about this machine, so it's going to take me just a little bit to get through it all, but hopefully by the end, you might have a better idea of what's going on with the Shark, and whether or not you might want one. So let's just do a quick overview first, just to get you used to what we're dealing with here. Now I have been through all the different modes on this one, laser engraving, ABL, dual color, the works, and I have produced install videos for all of those features. But we have a fully enclosed i3 design, a lot like the other printers that you see nowadays. It does have the 4040 extrusion, which is kind of an upgrade for some of these printers. This is for the Y carriage. You do have a touchscreen. It is handheld, you can move it around, has a curly cord on it, kind of like the old Intellivision setup. You have your removable steel sheet on your heated bed. Your X carriage does have a whole lot of fans on it. We'll get more into that in a moment. And then the typical X carriage location for your Bowden-fed extruder over to your hot end. From the back, we do have one Z screw. It is a TR 8x8, pretty common on this style of machine. And you do have a case back here to cover your power supply. So right out of the gate, probably nothing that's going to jump out at you to say, hey, I want to buy this over another i3 machine. And right out of the gate, I'm going to go ahead and say that out of all of the i3 style machines like this one that I've used, I think I like this one the best. And that's saying something, because this one has proprietary firmware, so I can't even get in and mess around with the settings like I like to do. But this one comes with a Cura profile that is really well tuned, and you don't see that on these machines. It just turns out a really nice print, and this one has a set of features, even if you don't add anything on, that makes it easy to use, and that's the set of features that I think should be on every 3D printer nowadays. So let's start this out with just all the different features that I like on this machine. So now I mentioned before, I have gone through all the different iterations of this machine. Laser engraving, dual color, ABL sensor, but for this review, I'm going to mainly focus on single color printing. And it really doesn't matter, single color, dual color. I will touch on the dual color because I think it works really well for this type of hot end. But the features you're really looking for if you're going to buy a 3D printer like this really don't revolve around the add-ons at all. So let's just work our way around. You do get a removable steel sheet. This one is a lot thicker than the other ones that you see. It's not as easy to flex. And that's good and bad. I do like to see them more rigid, but it is a lot harder to pop off the part when you need to. And this sheet does stick really well, so it's important to get your first layer down just right. And with that, of course, the first layer is always important. You can level this printer with the bed wheels, but it does have that add-on touch sensor. It is not a BL Touch, it is an aftermarket type. And it hooks into the same spot that the laser does, just right on the side of the hot end. Now, unless you block this mount up with some washers or something, you will lose just a little bit of your X when you're using this sensor. But all in all, on a machine like this, it's plenty sturdy. The sheet is nice and flat, and so is the bed. I don't think you need ABL on something like this, personally. It's just fine how it is, level it with the bed screws, call it a day. After I got it dialed in, with ABL and without, I never really had to level it much after that. It's a pretty sturdy little machine. So if you like ABL, go for it. I don't think you need it. And as we continue looking at the features of this printer, I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the sensor and the laser engraver, just because I think it's going to be easier to show you different things. But if you add on these features, keep in mind you're going to have to focus on some wire management at some point. So now let's focus on the hot end. Again, I have the dual color hot end installed. We will take a look at that. But the single color hot end is a hot end that you've probably seen before. It's your standard Creality style Hotend, where the PTFE tube for the Bowden feeder goes all the way down to the nozzle. It's nothing very unique by any means, but this design usually does work just fine. A lot of you probably already have experience with it. Make sure you get that PTFE tube lined up right against the nozzle and you should be okay. It does come with a silicone sock. And here's a look at the dual Hotend setup. It does give you just a little bit more mass on the heat sink, but it's going to have some room to be able to wire both of those filaments in there. It has a little flatter heat block, which is actually different from the single color, which I thought they would have used the same one on both, but they didn't. You will have to reuse your heater and thermistor, switch them over from the single if you want to add this on. And they've got some fiberglass sheet with some Captain tape wrapped around here for insulation, kind of old school. But maybe they'll come out with a silicone sock for this one as well, or switch the block out. I had really good luck with this Hotend though. On this design where you have 2-in-1, a lot of these tend to jam. But with this Hotend and the slicer settings they gave you to use it, I didn't have any problems at all. Now remember, anytime you're using dual filament or multiple filaments, you want to make sure the ramming sequence is correct, because after you pull it back, you don't want it to be too big for the tube. But this one did a really great job, no problems at all. You'll see some of those prints a little bit later. And then we have this, the fan shroud for this guy. And this is one of the most interesting that I've ever seen. You have your 40/40 Hotend fan, but then you have 3 different part cooling fans. There's no duct on them, it's just the squirrel cage type, the little thinner type, blowing onto the part in 3 different directions. I believe these are all 30mm by 10mm cage fans. And as you'll see in a little bit, part cooling, not a problem with this design. If you do get some strings or something like that, loose filament, they do tend to get stuck in here and stop the fan. So they might want to consider some sort of duct to keep that from happening, but it's not a huge deal. And in my opinion, a lot of these printers, this style, part cooling is where they really lack. And moving on to the feeder side of things, you do get dual drive gears, so the gears grip it from both sides. And yes, these are all metal parts. Thank you, Lotmaxx, for not making the plastic arm. Now with the dual drive gears, they can be kind of hard to feed the filament in without a filament load sequence, so be aware of that. If you open it up too much, it can kind of bind on the gears, so you have to get it just right. But not a huge issue, and over here you do have your switch for filament runout. And if you get the dual color, you get one on top that's exactly like this. It still has the dual drive gears. This is a much improved design and probably a lot of the reason why the print quality is better than some of the other models that you see. Now let's move on to the touchscreen. You have your Shark logo, and the machine again is in double extruder mode, but it's not going to be that much different for single extrusion. You can configure a few options on this machine through a config file. You just have to reload the firmware to load those in. I'll show you that real quick. And just for your information, here's a look at the configuration file for the Shark. You can change things in here, then load it on the SD card and have it update. There's a handful of settings in here if you want to check them out, if you feel like you need to mix something up. The ones we change in the other videos are things like ABL or the second extruder down here. Just be aware of that. This configuration file is on your SD card when you get it. But there's not much here really. You have print, control, and settings, but there's not much in each. Print is just a list of files. Control, you can do the auto leveling. You can also do manual leveling. It'll give you some spots to run around the bed if you don't have the sensor installed. You can control the fans, disable the steppers, turn the audio off. 0 will auto home. You can preheat, move around. In extrusion, you can do load and unload filament for both extruders if you wish. So there are sequences for that. And then in settings, you can do about to see what level of firmware you're on. You can calibrate the touch screen, change the language, get a status. It's just a quick location and temp check screen. And then you also have power loss recovery if something happens. You can come to the continue menu and pick which file you'd like to try to recover. And the process does seem to work fairly well. But that's pretty much all you get on the screen. But all in all, it's really simple. It's really responsive. You don't have to keep touching it like a lot of the other screens do. One thing I would like to see them add is baby stepping while printing, so you can adjust your first layer if you do have ABL. And that brings us to the guts of this machine. Here's our main board. Below down here you do have the module where you interface with the board. This is for your add-ons. We'll take a look at that from the front just a little bit later. You get a squirrel cage 5015 fan to cool the whole thing. It is fairly quiet. You have your stepper drivers. They do have 2208s for X and Y. The rest of them are A4988s. So they kind of went low end on these. Not that it matters that much on sound, but just note that they're not all silent stepper drivers, just the X and Y. And if you get dual color, you should get this fifth driver with your kit. I heard some folks did not get that driver, so if you didn't, make sure you get a hold of Lotmaxx and they will send you one. And looking around in here, there's actually some pretty interesting stuff. You might see this right in the middle. That appears to be a Wi-Fi module. I don't know anything about it or the software that they're going to be using in the future to control it, but if they're going to be introducing some sort of cloud component, that might be an added feature you want to look at. We do have the tie-down terminals for the power in that I like to see. Standard screw terminals for Hotends. No big change there. JST connectors for fans. We do have ribbon cable for the screen module, as well as our input module down there on the front. USB-B to come in serial. You can use Octoprint, micro SD card. The board does say Lotmaxx on it. It says Alpha M 1.03. So it appears to be something they have created just for these projects. I don't know much more about the board than that. This module up here though, this is the one that supports the screen. It says HDMI on it, so inside there is an HDMI plug. And then behind door number 2, you do have your LRS 350 24 volt power supply. That seems to be pretty common on these machines nowadays. This is a little higher end supply than we've seen in the past. Again, I will mention, if you've dealt with a Meanwell, those fans can be kind of annoying. They're a little loud. Just something to be aware of. If you have noise on your printer, it might be that. So there's all the good stuff with the hardware. You get a 32-bit board, dual extruder gears, touchscreen, Meanwell power supply, but Lotmaxx also gives you their own flavor of Cura. And it is Cura 4.2.7, but they do have some pretty solid profiles in here, including a high-speed one. You'll see it just a little bit more when we start looking at the prints, but they're all pretty good profiles. There's not a lot of guesswork here trying to get a decent print on this machine with your own slicer. Also, they've done all the work if you get the dual color. All this is set up for you. You don't have to change anything. It's available. And believe it or not, with 3D printers, this does provide a lot of value. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of getting a clean print. So I think Lotmaxx did a pretty good job on the Shark overall, putting in a lot of the features that you would expect on a lower cost printer, but a lot of them that are nice to have, like filament runout and touchscreen. But of course, as with every project, there's going to be a few downsides. And let's jump right back to that Lotmaxx version of Cura. Sure, Cura does a great job at 3D printing, but they've tried to throw in the laser features. And from what I can gather, this is something cobbled together with a bunch of different firmwares and slicing programs. This is all you get if you want to set up your laser engraving job. There's almost no features here. You can't make it any more granular. You can't set up the laser in low power mode. This is just a really half-baked solution. Now, I did try Lightburn. You can get a free trial of that. And it does kind of work, but it doesn't completely shut the laser off. You can use an M3, M5 like this laser does to control it, but it doesn't work exactly the same. You could probably make it work, but not out of the box. And I did attempt quite a few tests. They turn out okay, but any more than just simple items, you're really not going to get the granularity that you need to make a nice engraved image. And just to compare, here's one that I did with the Lotmaxx software, as well as this one. Again, they turn out okay, but even the attempts with the Lightburn software that didn't turn out so well, it doesn't completely shut the laser off, they're much better. So even with it not working completely correct, it's much improved. And because of that and the limited room that it gives you by adding that laser on, I don't think the laser engraving function is even worth adding. I hope that they improve their software in the future so that it's a lot better than it is today, but it's very half-baked at this point. I do like it that you can swap it out really easy and you don't have to make any firmware changes. It just knows that the module is present, but other than that, it's probably not worth your time. The laser module does just plug in right up here in front. Again, it knows that you have it installed, so it's really easy to remove if you just want to use it once in a while. But that's about its best feature. And while we're here, that's one other thing I wanted to mention about this printer. When you add on features, it's going to be really hard to integrate them on the fly without having a cable mess. They have you plug your second extruder for dual and your leveling sensor right here in front, as well as for your laser. But that really creates a wire management problem. You don't have a lot of options here. I'm not exactly sure where would be a better place to put these plugs, but this seems to be as far away from where you need them as possible. You end up having to route everything down the extrusion and up the side. It just kind of creates a mess. There has to be a better solution for this whole thing. Maybe if you were going to be in a permanent configuration, you could set it up a lot better, make the wires look all nice and neat, but then you really lose the functionality of being able to remove them if you want to. So I really don't see a happy medium here. But outside of that, the printer does a pretty nice job at everything else. And it does run really quiet. Also, as an added bonus, it does give you a thumbnail of the print while it's printing. You're starting to see that on more and more printers now, and I think that's a value add for sure. It will even portray the different colors on 2-color prints. Whatever you used in their version of Cura will display here. Here's just the fan noise. And here it is with all the part fans running. Whatever driver they use for the Z motor just has a bit of chatter in it, you notice every once in a while. Especially when you have ABL enabled. Here's the bed set at 60C. Again, this is a little bit thicker sheet than I'm used to seeing, but it's a little cooler around the edges, a little warmer in the center. It's actually about 10 degrees higher than it should be. And here's the bed at 100C. Again, the same issue, about 10 degrees overshoot, but it does make it accurate in the corners of the bed where it's just a little bit cooler. And at that temp of 100C, no issues at all with those magnets. They still grip nice and tight. Don't burn yourself. So it does run pretty quiet, and it has a lot of features that I would expect to see on a 3D printer like this nowadays, but the big question is, how does it print? And I did do a lot of printing on this machine. And I don't get to use just plain dual color or dual material machines very often, so I actually had a lot of fun picking different colors and creating different models. And you'll see a few of those. So let's start with Foxy here. This is Jessie PLA. It's their gold color. I believe they call it Winter something. And it has a few issues. You can see a few inconsistent layers. And you don't see that on every model. You can see one in here, in between the eyes. I'm not exactly sure what caused it on this print. Maybe the filament was just hung up a bit. But outside of those, the print came out pretty nice. I probably should have went with a few more top layers or maybe just a little bit more infill. It's kind of sparse up here at the top. But not bad for just getting started. This is the default 0.2 profile. Then I went for another Luby model. This one came out much better. This is Prushiment Royal Blue. You can see a little bit of inconsistency, but all in all, a really great print. This is the quality I would expect to see out of an i3 machine. And then I did a Batman. It turned out pretty well. This is Prushiment Mystic Green. It's hard to get the full effect in the camera. It just looks brown. But it actually kind of has a color changing tint to it. It's pretty cool. Even these really small sections here by the ears, it did a pretty good job on those. And then of course I had to do some Adelindas, but I wanted to test out the high versus low speed profile. These are both 0.2, and unfortunately I had to switch out to another filament at the end, and I think there was something wrong with that filament. It caused some really bad inconsistency. You'll see it on the other one. But I started out with a lot higher grade. You can see the quality on this one. Not bad. I believe these were 200% scale. This one took 22 hours. I think it's 20% infill. And on this one, you're going to kind of have to use your imagination. because you can see the dimples and things. This was caused by the filament, not necessarily the speed. But down in here, you can see the issues that I would expect to see from a faster print. Lots of artifacts, misaligned layers, especially here on the leg. But it is a lot lower quality, I'll give you that. But it only took 12 hours to print. And some i3 machines probably couldn't do that. So I commend it for even running to completion at that speed. I did bump up the temp to 230 on this. That could have also caused some of this imperfection. Vase mode, no problem. Looks great. And then I really wanted to test out the retraction just to see how it was going to go. I believe they call these Voronoi. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a pretty cool little duck. Came out pretty good for what it is. Now onto some of the two-color prints, and I'm pretty impressed with these overall. The accuracy is good. I didn't have to tweak the slicer at all. I just used what they gave me. I've done some two-color Adelindas before. But both the filament and how the print came out, this one looks just really good. That one turned out so well. I also did a water dragon. It came out just as good, if not better. I did a two-color foxy, a two-color owl, and of course you can't go without the two-colored Banshee. Very impressed with the dual-color mode on this. Didn't have one jam through all these prints. So the print quality is definitely on par with a lot of the other i3 machines out there in this price range, and they do give you that version of Cura. The profiles are pretty good. I'm sure you could make them better, but just getting it out of the box and up and printing, the quality is there, even in dual color mode. And again, that's worth a lot. And this printer isn't one that you're going to want to hack and tweak on. It's meant to get it out of the box, it has some polish to it, it's got a lot of features you want to use, and it's going to be repeatable and consistent over and over. You don't have to mess with it. So there it is, the Lotmaxx SC-10 Shark. And now's the time in the video where I try to decide if I would purchase this 3D printer. Well, during the crowdfunding campaign, these were going for $279 if you back that project. And that gets you right up against the price of a Creality Ender 3 V2. And they're pretty similar machines. Now, I'm not sure what the final price on the Shark is going to be, but if I had to pick this one over some other i3 machines, this one seems just a little bit more polished. It's probably the best aluminum extrusion i3 style machine at this price point that I've ever used. It has a feature set like dual drive gears on the extruder, and the Cura profiles that it comes with are pretty good out of the box. You can just get up and start 3D printing and the quality is there, even in dual color mode. Now, do I think it's worth adding on the ABL? Probably not for a machine like this. It's sturdy enough, you can manually level the bed. And the laser engraving isn't quite baked yet. They need to add a lot of features to that software to make it even useful. And here's the time where I give you the spiel about Kickstarter campaigns or any crowdfunding campaign. That's just a donation. They don't necessarily have to deliver on that promise. Also, this machine was given to me ahead of time, so the machine you get might be different than the one I'm showing you today. I can only go off of what I see and what I've tested, so be aware of that. All in all, I think it's a fine i3 style machine at a pretty reasonable price. So hopefully you found this video helpful. That's it for today, and I'll see you really soon on the next one.